are falling, but it's time to pause, cause Mother Nature's calling. I'll be back in a second and I'll continue the reckoning. They will still be waiting for us, and the pressure grows to make a save and throw, to introduce some movie, turn the lights down low. My armors exposed, I'm getting full of holes. Think I need another chorus. Sooner or later the dice land on the table. You know that's what fables are made of. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. This is a critical hit. My main man and double damage with it. Oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. It's critical, critical. That ain't how we roll. Oh no, it ain't stolen. We on a roll. Hey, we on a roll. That ain't how we roll. Oh no, it ain't stolen. We on a roll. Hey, we on a roll. Sooner or later the dice land on the table. You know that's what fables are made of. Oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. This is a critical hit. My main man and double damage with it. Oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. It's critical, critical. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. This is a critical hit. Oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. It's critical, critical. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. This is a critical hit. My main man and double damage with it. Oh yeah, it's a critical hit. Everybody sing, oh yeah, it's a critical hit. It's critical, critical.
Critical hit. Yeah, I love that song. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Arvanauts, to a Friday night stream. It is May 31st. Welcome to the last day of May. I can't believe that. Can you believe we are heading into halfway through the year? How is it possible that the year is already halfway done? Like, I don't even understand how that's possible. It's crazy. But welcome, everybody, to Masters of the Dungeon. It is episode 19 of Masters of the Dungeon, our D&D roundtable show, where we talk about all things game mastering, dungeon mastering, and tabletop role-playing game related. I hope you are looking forward to the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, basically, where we chat about stuff relating to this field. And you're quite right, Wiley. I hope you were here to be able to listen to some, to learn, as you said, and to gain some info and knowledge from the people that we've got on the show. I hope that you enjoy that and can add some of your own wisdom as well. But it's not, there's another month. What do you mean? What are you talking about? There's another month. We're going into month 6, man. We're going into month 6. You can deny it, but we are going into month 6. The year is passing. Soon I'll be talking about October and Halloween, and there's another month until halfway through the year. We are entering, though, the 6th month is my point. We're entering it. You cannot deny it, Shadowed. You feel it slipping away. The year is slipping away. But anyway, exactly. I don't want to hear it. Oh, man. But anyway, so just a couple things before we get started. First of all, thank you for being here. Please follow the channel if you're not done so already. Please check out the YouTube channel with !ARV2. Please check out the Discord with !ARVCord. We can hang out with the Arvanauts in between streams. Please check out the website for this, which is arvaneleron.com. You can get a lot of details there about the schedule of the channel, the Curse of Strahd podcast, audio podcast, and things like that. Please make sure to check out the Twitter as well with !tweets. And thank you for those of you who retweeted or liked the tweets. Please retweet those tweets. Retweet them, tweet, !tweet to be able to do that. And you can follow me on Twitter with the !ARVTweets. That would be much appreciated as well. On the financial side, we've got the merchandise, which is !ARVshop. That will allow you to get over to my merchandise section, which is shortly going to be expanding because Kilobyte is working feverishly on that and building up the merchandise area, which will be nice. And then, of course, you've got the Patreon, which is !ARVTreon. Yeah. Oh God, I love that song too. Trains is such a good song. The live version of Trains, actually, shout out, I think is even better than the album version. The one that they did in Chicago, really, really good. Anyway, yes, tweet the retweets. Everyone tweet. Anyway, exclamation point Arv Treon will allow you to support the Patreon. Currently sitting at $333.96. We're trying to get that back up to $350 and beyond, so please do that. And last but certainly not least, that sub button. We are close to 50 subs, which is awesome. So let's continue to push. Getting over 50 subs would be very much appreciated as we head up to our record, which is 71 subs, and hopefully we can hit our goal. By the end of the year, my goal was to hit 80 subs, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that when we get there. But thanks to all of those who have supported the Patreon and the subs and all that as well. Now, quick note about schedule. I just posted the basic sort of first try schedule starting in June, starting tomorrow. Again, this is very tentative. Normally what happens is I post the schedule and then there has to be adjustments and changes and alterations based upon people's scheduling plans and the like. So this is not finalized, but you can head over there and take a look at it and you can see sort of the basics of it. In terms of the highlights that I want to make, I want to say simply that tonight we've got Masters of the Dungeon, and then I will be playing some sorcery, hopefully wrapping up the Carré City Port of Traps. And then we're going to be moving on to, in all likelihood, Book 3, which will be the Seven Serpents of Sorcery. That we're going to be doing tomorrow. And then next week, on Tuesday, we will be getting some stuff involved with probably the Sherlock Holmes Diogenes Club Gamebook Live Illustration. We'll also having the Patreon nominations to the Patreon Fueled Chat Chosen Game of the Month. And then Pen and Pixels, I'll be moving back into Pathfinder Kingmaker at long last. And then after that, you can take a look at the various schedule information about that. The only other day I want to mention, which is important to keep in mind, is a week from this Tuesday, June 11th, is going to be the official launch of the Jelinek Kickstarter, Icarus Kickstarter. I'm going to be talking about this quite a bit over the next few days. This is obviously a very important thing for me and my career, and it's an important thing for the channel too, in terms of things that we're hoping to build in to this channel that is connected to it. So please, please, please mark your calendars for that. That's going to be a really important day. Launch day, June 11th. Going to be very exciting. I can't wait. And again, I'm just very pleased with the art that I've seen from Achala, and it's going to be awesome. So please mark your calendars for the official launch day, June 11th. Last thing I want to note is that there are not one, but two announcements about content for the channel, specific to the channel, which I can't talk about yet, but we'll be able to talk about soon. And so you should stay tuned, because basically the channel's content is expanding, and I cannot wait to tell you the details of this. I think you're going to be very excited with it on both announcements, separate announcements about channel content expanding. So be aware of that, because that's going to be coming very, very soon. I cannot wait to make those announcements having on the long line. So that's the situation that we're going to have. So with all that said, I totally get that, Shadow. Food obviously is totally understand, man. But with that said, it is my great pleasure to welcome in to the fold, welcome back to the fold, I should say, someone who should need no introduction, because she's blowing up, basically, is the point that I want to make. Like her career is just, is on a meteoric rise. And of course, oh my God. And Shadow immediately resubs. What? Oh, Aridinel gifted it. Oh, thank you, Aridinel. Dude, Aridinel is such a good dude. You are way too generous, Aridinel, as I've said on multiple occasions. Like, really. Don't make me come up to Maine and tell you how you need to stop being that generous. Thank you, dude. That's really, really kind of you. And so Shadowed Mage is resubbed because of that. That is super nice. Thanks, dude. That's really kind of you, Aridinel. Good guy, Aridinel. But I was going to say, that announcement came out, that sort of gift sub came out just as I was about to announce the person who's with me. And of course, that is my wonderful co-host, Little Red Dot, who was with us. And Dot, welcome. And yeah, I know that, thanks for taking 5 seconds out of your busy flying schedule to here, there, and everywhere. But how are you? Like, how many frequent flyer miles have you built up to this point? Have you just,
Oh man, it's been a lot this month. It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot.
But this has been all good. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about this in more detail, but like, tell the folks what over the last, 6 weeks, what cons you've been doing, because you've had like 2 in that span, right?
Yeah. So I guess if you count D&D, well, I moved. So that was LifeCon. LifeCon happened, and then LifeCon. So I moved my life, which was great. And then
I
went.
Get comped for it either. LifeCon.
I did not. LifeCon really kicks me in the teeth. Those assholes. No, and then right after that, the following weekend, I went out for the D&D live event out in LA. Our podcast, North by Northwest, was invited to go and sit and run and play in a few of the live stream games. So that's pretty cool, which I guess I can talk about later.
Yeah.
And then the weekend after that, I was at MomoCon. So that was this past weekend. So yeah, that was good stuff too, which is a local anime, animation, and gaming convention that happens here in Atlanta. It's a pretty big deal. So yeah. Oh, looks like somebody else is about to go through LifeCon.
Moving out of current living situation a month or two can confirm you do not get comped for LifeCon. Oh, Brahms. Yeah,
you do not get comped for LifeCon. There are no sponsors for LifeCon.
And LifeCon also is like the programming directors at LifeCon are very unresponsive. Like they're sometimes they're astonishingly responsive, but then they vanish for long periods of time, and it's kind of, it's sort of
a hot mess, really.
Yeah, it really is. And there's no guarantee, like if you do well at LifeCon one year, there's no guarantee that you'll be invited back on programming for LifeCon next year. I mean, it's all true. Yeah, it's very much.
It's really a roll of the dice.
Yes, as we. It's funny. If only you folks could see some of the things that we chat about, before stream and off stream. In the green room. But anyway, it's a great pleasure to have Dot with us. And it is just today. It is just Dot and me. We do, however, have, you will all be happy to know that I have already got guests lined up for at least June and probably June and July, but definitely June. And it's the person I'm not going to announce quite yet, but I'm very excited about this person, and I think this will be a very good person to have as a guest. So we will be back for that with a fuller crew at that time. But Dot and I will soldier on ourselves because we do have things to talk about. And for those of you who don't know, the way that we do things here is that this is our D&D roundtable, which really broadens out to tabletop roundtable. So we talk about all kinds of different tabletop games. We talk especially about game mastering as the focus of this show, but we also talk about things more sort of general to role-playing and how role-playing kind of ties into game mastering, dungeon mastering, tabletop work, and stuff like that. And then we have a chance to talk a little bit about a product review. I've got one for this month, actually based upon something which happened with my charity convention, ArvCon, that happened just a couple weeks ago. So yeah, we will have a chance to talk about all that sort of thing. And then you folks will get your say. So at the end of all of this, you folks will have a chance to ask us questions about anything relating to your own campaigns, things you've been thinking about, the industry in general, how to get in with the programming people at LifeCon. We can talk about how we don't know how to do that. So all of those are options available to you at the end of this show. So, all right, let's get started by talking a little bit. We're going to jump right into it. And normally what we do is we start up by talking about our campaigns. So I am going to start by asking Dot about how your campaigns are going now that you're back into a more regular streaming schedule. And not that your gaming ceased during that time, but I'm just saying how
it kind of did though.
Oh, did it? Okay. Well, now that they've restarted, I didn't want to assume. Now that they've restarted, what has been going on that's sort of cool about the campaigns? I mean, I guess if you want to talk about what it's like to get back in the saddle after you've been off the horse for a little while, how have your campaigns been going in general?
Well, let's see. So I think since the last time I did this, I closed out a VTM campaign. I can't remember if we talked about that or not, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah,
very intense VTM campaign. And we have, in its stead, launched a Game of Thrones tabletop over on Roll For It, which has been a lot of fun. So that's been my big hype right now. I only got to play one game. I'll be back this Saturday because I had to take 3 weeks off. But man, oh man, I'm having a blast. It's very intrigue based. I think they did a lot of combat over the last couple of games because they had combat heavy characters, but my character is not. So I'm excited to start into some of the deeper Game of Thrones role play.
You gotta have a better ending.
Conniving, yeah. Oh, don't fret. We will. Don't you fret. But yeah, so it's that's been kind of cool, and that's been something that's launched up. I'm trying to think anything else new things. I picked back up in a Cypher System game, actually. I've been playing a lot of Cypher Systems.
Nice.
Which has been kind of cool. Yeah. So I think the Game of Thrones one is, let's see if I can highlight a really great moment. Oh, I got a great moment. So our very first game took place at a tournament because I mean it's Game of Thrones, why wouldn't it? And it's set in the Riverlands, so it's called Game of Thrones Riverlands, and our entire campaign takes place around a family set in Riverlands. And so they're having this big tournament, and my character is really she's from Dorne. And they're negotiating a marriage between her brother and the oldest female of this family. So she gets dragged into this tournament. Now she carries a whip and a dagger. And so all of these characters, these crazy like combat characters, like we have a Lannister that comes in, ends up at the very end. The tournament like whittles down all the way to the end of the episode, and it turns out to be the 2 women on the battlefield,
Nice.
leaving all the men behind. Like it totally played out that way. Maggie actually played the other one. I played this like very over-sexualized Dornish character, and we duked it out until the end. Whip and mace. It was badass.
Wow.
It was cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's been this whole thing now, like talked about in the game because 2 women basically kicked ass on the tournament field and left all the men behind. So, yeah, we're known as the battle lesbians because both of our characters are also lesbians. So it's been
It's the BLs.
the BLs. So that's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, actually, it's funny you bring that up because that's actually what I was going to highlight was going to be something similar. So for whatever reason, so ArvCon, for those of you who are listening or watching and do not know about this, was my charity event. We raised almost $2,000 for the Dame Mareni Cancer Research Foundation. So thank you to those of you who contributed. Thank you to all the corporate sponsors and all that stuff. I've said a million thank yous to people, but I can't say it enough because it was really, really awesome. And especially thanks to my mods in here like Shadowed and everybody else who did all the wonderful job in handling the raffles and all that. It was great. But so on the Saturday of it, we basically had my Adventures of Middle-earth campaign started at noon. We went 5 hours this time. Then we had a concert. And then that evening, we had a special event, which is something I'm going to be talking more about a little bit later, actually, during the product review, called Hearts of Wulin, which is based on Wushao Theater and is on Kickstarter right now and has been kicking lots of butt. And the game was great. And, you know, I will not say anything more about that relating to... No, I don't want to spoil anything. I'll just say that you know, it was a cool game and it seemed to play well on this channel, and I'll just say that. But anyway, so both of those things. So starting in the morning, so one of the characters played by Amal El-Matar, who's one of our regular players, she plays someone who is about 21 years old, the River, who is a woodsman of Roscabel, and she ends up falling for, and this was really, I hadn't necessarily planned it this way, but there ends up being a person who is elven descent named Ash, who is an escaped slave, who basically has a group of these ex-slaves that got away from these bandits and, have this sort of burning hatred of imprisonment and captivity, as you might expect, and they're all kind of badass and whatever. So they show up and, at some point, Amal's character, the River, is sort of like, really admires Ash, and at a certain point she kind of gets a little flushed around her, and I'm like, all right, well, apparently I'm going to continue with this vein. So they end up having this whole thing where like there's this sort of, they see each other from a distance, and then after they manage to escape, they're celebrating in Roscabel around the fire, and there's a moment where they're talking to each other, and then they actually dance around the fire. And so Amal was like then tweeting about it afterwards, like, I ship this so hard, like the whole 9 yards, right? It was awesome. It was this amazing, romance between 2 women, between Ash and between the Rivers. That was like, wow, that's awesome. I'm glad things worked out that way. That evening, Hearts of Wulin shows up. So Hearts of Wulin, if you know anything about Wushao Theater, if you've ever watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it is awesome kung fu combined with extraordinarily overcomplicated romances that don't come to fruition or often don't. And so it was basically just the romance role-playing day. Like, it was just all these romances, and I was like, I've okay, like I'm just, I'm gonna go along with. But it was really, really funny because it was one of those things where I had not planned it that way, but there was something in the zeitgeist that said that we need to get romances going on with all of the characters involved, and it was something which we've had a lot of sort of. There's been a lot of discussion in my campaigns of parents and children, of brothers and sisters, clearly of friendships, of sort of individual decisions versus individual benefits versus ethical, what's best for the group, a sacrifice, all those sorts of things. But I will fully admit that just because the players have not necessarily kind of gone in that direction, that romance has not been one of the things we've covered. And now we have a couple of campaigns where that was actually starting to happen, which I thought was great. It's a whole sort of different world for me in terms of dungeon mastering and game mastering, but it's really neat. And it is a dimension that it does not make sense to shy away from, insofar as a very good deal of human history has been based upon either successful or failed romances of one kind or another. So kind of staying away from that and making the whole thing about I just swing a sword at somebody is obviously problematic. But I don't know. I was really, I don't know why it worked out that way, but it was really cool. So yeah, it was neat. You have to stream Wulin again for Valentine's week. Yeah, I mean, listen, Hearts of Wulin is another name for Brahms' romantic life. Listen, all right, well, all you have to do, Brahms, is if you want to see if that, like, test and see if that's true. You have that, like, romantic, like, but it's all really complicated and kind of sucks. Then you walk out of your house or wherever you are, jump up and see if you can float over trees. And if you can float over trees, then you are clearly in wuxia theater. You have to combine those. If you can do kung fu, but there's no romance, it's not wuxia. And if you can, if you can do romance, but there's no floating on trees, then it's probably not wuxia. So you could just double check and see one way or the other. But anyway, that's what happened in my campaign. It was fun. It was good times. Yeah, so romance is a thing. Did you actually in the vampire campaign, in the Vampire the Masquerade you were doing, was romance a component of it? Because I did not have a chance to watch a whole lot of it. Was there any or not?
I mean, it's called World of Darkness for a reason, right? So there's the like vampire lust, I'd say.
Right.
And there was like some weird sibling business. They're like close, but like, it's just
okay.
like they're just like close. But nothing close. Like close, there were a few times where I think the audience really wanted ships to happen, but like I think you have to remember, and it was really hit home for me in this campaign, that like World of Vampire the Masquerade is about watching a character that you've created with humanity lose that humanity. So by the time you drop from where most kindred start at a humanity 7, and by the time you drop to humanity 5, you can't even have sex without faking it.
Wow.
So there is actually rules set into the game where things that like we, with people that have a deep level of soul and humanity, seek, you no longer seek those things. It's how and why so many older kindred become disconnected from things like killing random people or eating children, right? Yeah. It's a game about becoming a bad person.
Yeah.
Like, it is. Now, some people run it where like, oh, we want, LA by Night's like, oh, we're here to kill the bad vampires. But really the book flat out tells you, like, in the first 20 pages, it has a whole paragraph that's like, you are not a hero. This is not some heroic life you lead. And no matter how hard you try, you're still a kindred. And the rest of the World of Darkness society will hunt you and kill you, because even if you think you're special, you're not. You're just a bad creature. So accept it and learn to live your life within the Camarilla society, like law and rule set. So it's been really interesting because it actually forces you as a character or as a player to not rely on a lot of the same things that you do with other characters, like being able to have those relationships.
Yeah.
If you can't really have a deep-seated relationship for the sheer fact that you don't have the humanity to be able to even conceive it, you go about everything differently. You don't trust people. There's this strange bit of intrigue. Who can I tell what to? You have to make deals differently because you don't trust. So it's just it's real interesting. So in terms of hard romance, no. Okay. In terms of the audience being like, please God, ship that. Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Okay. And maybe that's part of, that's how all of the love poetry got its real power, through the fact that it was forbidden and couldn't happen, and like the beloved is never going to be. So maybe that's part of what happens with the vampire stuff too. Like it can't happen. So that's what makes it even, that the tension is even the greatest thing. And yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, okay. So that makes sense too. I mean, like it's true that, vampires are just uplifting system, like Cthulhu and this very, and
World of Darkness is like
very uplifting.
It's some serious business. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool though. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about let's get into the topic of the day that I wanted us to focus on, which is about, and the reason I brought this up was precisely because both of us are going to have either just gotten off of a bunch of, or are going to be doing conferences and conventions. For me, I've done a couple already, but the big busy convention season kind of comes up in the next few months. So I'm going to be going to Origins in Columbus, and then I'm going to be going to ReaderCon in Boston, and then I'm going to be going to Gen Con in Indianapolis, and then so we have a lot of conferences coming up. But Dot obviously is also going to be at Gen Con. Yes, Gen Con also. So she's going to be at Gen Con, but also, as I said, has been like jet setting it, up to this point by going to all of these incredible things. So what I want to ask is, so you've just done the two, D&D Live counts also, although I know you said it's a very different kind of con thing.
We could always chat about that if you wanted to live, but yeah, it was more an event and less of a convention.
Okay. So
Think of it.
Right. So I'm going to be curious about that. I do want to hear more about that. But but what I want to ask about, what I want to throw out there for discussion is, what is the sort of convention and conference experience when it's connected with the rest of what we do in terms of tabletop? So, for example, live events, things that we're doing in front of audiences or in front of sheets of plexiglass, things like that. Being able to connect with people face to face, do pickup games, run games for people that you absolutely don't know, not just in an online setting like your Sunday Fun Day. I know you know many of those people, but not necessarily.
Sure, they come from the dot lot, the community. Sure, yeah.
But like, and I D&D with viewers is the same thing for me, but it's like, I don't know them necessarily as well as, other people might be. But, this is complete pickup, like complete stranger, just playing for people. If you're doing something at like, one of the Gen Con events or something like that where you're hosting for people. What is that like? I'm curious about how you think conventions and conferences sort of fit into the overall tabletop life. Do you like them? Do you find them kind of like they're cool, but I don't want to do them much? Do you wish you could do them all the time? I just want to kind of have us talk a little bit about the sort of role that conferences and conventions play for us. And then we can talk about some specifics about differences of the way these cons work. So,
yeah, so for me, I go to I clock quite a few conventions. Because I've got at least 2 more before the end of the year. So that would be Gen Con and Dragon Con here in Atlanta. There's a possibility of one other convention if I can manage to figure it out, right? So, but I think when you're going from convention to convention, you have to look at what the convention offers and you have to decide based on what, like what you and I do, we're streaming and we're showing content and we're bringing people to content. I always look at like, what do I want out of this convention, right? So like my Dragon Con convention is what I call my party convention. I go to Dragon Con to cosplay and to party, which means usually I don't end up with a press badge. It means usually I do no volunteering. And if I run a table, it's because me and my friends are drunk and we find somewhere to sit down. And they're like, you guys want to roll some dice? We're like, yeah, right? So that's like Dragon Con for me. But then you look at something like Gen Con, where everything's about tabletop. And so Gen Con is a totally separate focus for me. Like I'm looking at running games for people, playtesting new material, meeting new people. Like last year, the big release was, for me, they released the V5 Vampire the Masquerade at Gen Con.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I showed up and picked up 3 books off the table, like a giddy schoolgirl, and bought 3 of them, 2 for friends and 1 for me. And so like, there's also that aspect, which I think Gen Con, and again, this is a difference and we'll get into it, does better than any other convention in terms of gaming.
Yep.
They just have that hype on the floor, the convention floor, about testing new things, seeing new content, getting stoked about what's about to hit market.
Yep.
The rest of the conventions I go to, even MomoCon, which has a tabletop focus, but their dealer's room is cosplay items, tchotchke stuff, booths for artists, but you don't find people playtesting games.
Right.
You don't find gaming companies there pitching new ideas or trying things. So it does depend, I think, on the convention, right? MomoCon is a very local convention for us, and we're usually one of the only podcasts that does panels, North by Northwest. So for us, it's a great opportunity to meet local audience, which is huge. Like I didn't even realize we had like local people, and they showed up and they're like, we listened to your podcast and we love you. And there's this really great moment of sharing not only the content you create, but the physical place in which you live, your physical community, as much as your online community. So it's this really kind of cool thing. So Momo's its own very special, like little niche, I guess you could say, for me. But
Yeah. Well, and you're right that I mean the differences I think are significant. Gen Con, for me is the granddaddy, and I will always have a
Right.
soft spot in my heart. That'll always be my favorite because I got my creative writing start there, and because it's kind of it's tabletop Disney World, like it's
Yeah.
there's a lot
Yeah.
because the thing is that, for people who have never been. It's not only you could spend the entire con, and many people do, just in the exhibit hall, because
Yep.
there's so much
The whole
going
time.
on with
Yep.
just testing and play testing and obviously an incredible amount of stuff being sold and done in events and special things just in the exhibit hall. But then outside you've got the symposium, which I've done for many years, which is the largest writer track in North America, by the way. So it's got all kinds of things that with a bunch of major authors that sort of are involved with doing different stuff. We had James S.A. Corey, who does The Expanse, was the guest of honor last year. So we have all that stuff, and so there's that, and then there's the gaming panel track, which is unbelievable and has the Chris Perkins of the world and the Matt Mercers of the world and the all of these people who are all giving.
And I'll be there on panels this year.
And has the dots of the world and the yeah. So see, this is what I'm talking about. You folks think is like this is why I knew Dot when, you know what I mean? I knew her. She was still on the rise, but I got her before she passed me on the way up the hill.
No.
Bicycling to charge over the
Really, I'm just begging. I'm that person that's like, hey, I'm running this panel. I need people to sit on it. You want to do that for me?
Can I do a panel?
I'm like, that was please choose.
That's funny.
Pick me.
No. It's absolutely not. You would be great on this. I have no doubt. But yeah, so so you've got all of that. And then you've got at Gen Con, then the cosplay, which is also very significant at cosplay at Gen Con. And then you've got True Dungeon, which is also its own freaking thing. And
right.
So it's freaking enormous, and anything you could want to do, you would find there. But Gen Con is its own thing, and it's one of there's not many cons that are like that. The Comic Cons obviously are very similar to this for comic people. So if you want to do graphic novels and stuff like that, that is where you go, and that's like freaking unbelievable when you go to the big ones like New York City Comic Con or obviously San Diego Comic Con or ones like that. And then everything else sort of depends on where you go. Some of them are more media con oriented and cosplay, like Dragon Con, which we talked about before. Some of them are very small. The smallest one I go to probably is Farpoint, which is in Baltimore, which has been going for a long time. And they do get, they had Wallace Shawn from The Princess Bride as their guest of honor. It's not bad. They get people.
That's pretty doggone good.
They get some people, but it's definitely not that large. It's a few hundred people probably, all the way up to 70, 80,000 people for something like Gen Con, and then everywhere in between. So it really does kind of depend. I guess my question would be, so you talked about, Dragon Con, you just go to party, and Gen Con, you go to sort of do gaming stuff. So is there, well, I guess it's hard to compare the partying versus the gaming, but I guess my question would be, what would be for you an ideal con? If you could combine the best elements of these things, would it be a small, intimate con where you get to meet all these people, but it's like, a few hundred people and they already know you? Or would it be a large con where you get to meet tons of new people and get lots of exposure, but it's not necessarily local to you, and it's it's a little bit more impersonal? It doesn't mean it's cold, but it's not like right around you.
Right. Okay, so my FrankenCon, LifeCon and FrankenCon.
Okay.
Canon now. My FrankenCon would probably be, so let me be real about DragonCon. There are some incredible panels. I love the paranormal track. It's just it's like a niche thing. I love to go sit in the paranormal conversations. You want to talk about some inspiration for story? Damn. But there's this aspect of popular culture and the very kind of new age aspect at DragonCon of the nerd realm. So it's really interesting. Actually, the improv company I work for is getting ready to do 2 plays. We do scripted work as well. One of them is called Wrath of Con, C-O-N. And it's literally we're remounting it, but it's a parody looking at the kind of convention issues, the comedic convention issues that happen at somewhere like DragonCon. So it's literally a parody of DragonCon. Okay. It's going to be followed by Wrath of Con 2, which is the same look at DragonCon, but post the Marvel MCU.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's looking at the nerd world from 2 perspectives. Now DragonCon is this this incredible pop culture experience.
Yeah.
You're going to see cosplay there that you're not going to see anywhere else, from movies and TV shows, not just comic books and video games, which like you go somewhere like Momo and it's all anime. All the cosplay is anime. Right? You will see so many ridiculous things. And when I say popular culture, you name it, it's there. So there's this really interesting aspect where it's drawing on all these realms, not this very kind of niche market.
Right.
You know, and I think that that's something that Dragon Con just gets. And therefore it creates a very party-rific, as I like to call it, atmosphere.
Okay.
That I don't think any other con nails. Now, not everybody comes to cons for parties. Dot likes to party. So it's nice to have that.
I'm gonna note
for
that
me.
down. Dot
Dot likes to party.
party.
You just you write that in solid black ink because it's the truth. But I think in terms of my interest, my personal interest, there's an aspect of Gen Con that is beautiful. It is a weekend of people coming together to play games and to tell story. And there is something so innately embedded in the human existence. From the time we had a fire, right? We could make fire and collect ourselves around it. We had games and we had stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think tabletop really collapses both of those. And so I like Gen Con because of that reason. But the spirit of Gen Con and the spirit of Dragon Con are very different. So in my perfect FrankenCon, they would come together. There would be giant rooms at Dragon Con where we could party and roll dice all at the same time, where you know, Rick Sanchez would be walking behind me, sitting next to somebody cosplaying a Dragonborn. Like, that's what I want in my life.
Yep.
Like, I need popular culture meets my hardcore love of rolling dice and telling stories.
All right, so I want to follow up with that. So I think that sounds very compelling to me. So what I'm curious about is, why do you think there has been, I have theories about this, but I'm curious why you think there has been such a divide. And again, we understand that we're talking generalities. Like, I'm sure I know there are parties that happen at Gen Con, and I'm sure that there are some games that played at Dragon Con, but having attended both, I can confirm that they are very different feeling things. There's no question about it. So why is that? I mean, like, why has there not been more of an attempt, or more of a successful attempt, I guess, to bring them together into one place? You know, why can't there be, and I would take that a step further. I would say most of them, there does, you know, you'll get a little bit of gaming at a Comic-Con, but not much. And I'm curious why. I mean, like, you would think that Comic-Cons, especially the huge ones, would have more room for game stuff to be involved. And clearly the other way around. I mean, you would expect that some gaming cons would be able to have some more access to Comic-Con. So the crowds do have overlap. So I'm curious why you think there is such a sort of tightly held divide between these cons. And not just Comic-Cons or anything else, but
I was about to say,
yeah,
so I'll give you my business sense tells me, because tabletop doesn't make money. Right?
Really? But the demographic is so well heeled, though.
Sure it is. The gaming company make a lot of money, but let's talk about how much more money you're going to make off, say, inviting a D&D celebrity, Satine Phoenix, for example,
okay,
versus, I don't know, who are they bringing in this year? Some big names. Oh, David Tennant. Okay. So when you're looking at your Comic-Cons, you're looking at the release of what I call high-end media.
Right.
Your movies, your blockbusters, your video games. I actually believe Marvel announced they're going to Comic-Con this year. They will be announcing the next MCU 4th at Comic-Con.
At Comic-Con.
That kind of hype, unfortunately, is not there for the tabletop community. So what you're fighting is what is going to draw even the outskirts of the audience, right? The marketer in me, literally, that's what I do for my day job, says, we're the lowest hanging fruit. We've been nerds forever. We're going to buy a ticket regardless of who's there, right? They want to reach the people on the outskirts, the people that have an interest in the new MCU movies but need to be drawn into the con culture. And the way to do that is to grab their celebrities. Okay. As much as I'd like to say Mike Merle is a celebrity in my eye, or Satine Phoenix, or Matt Mercer, the general populace on the outside, not the apple at the bottom of the tree here, people, the apple at the top, needs to be drawn in with a different name.
I'm glad to be counted among the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So then if that's true, though, then how do we explain the overwhelming success of the Critical Role Kickstarter with 10 million plus and doing so in an animated format? Like, is that a potential?
Because Critical Role has left this realm.
Oh, okay.
And has become this realm.
Okay.
Right. So Critical Role is an anomaly, really, at least in my book. It has done amazing things for tabletop. It has resurged a love in a new generation of game designers, of GMs, of storytellers, and of really audience.
Mm-hmm.
An audience, you have to have people that consume, right? The consumer.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. But it stands at a level its own. It's, I have people all the time. It's like, I want to be the next Critical Role. And I'm like, you'll never be that, because Critical Role is its own unique, incredible gem.
Yeah.
It's an anomaly. It happens once in a lifetime, right? It's a Star Wars. It's in our industry, it is a thing. It's like every podcast that wants to be, the brothers. Oh my God, my brain just died. They do, I have their comics sitting right over there. Anyways, right, they're just up here. And so you have to kind of recognize where the larger audience is at. Everybody loves Critical Role. It's now a higher end nerd level thing. Not to say that's bad. Not to say that that's bad. But then there's also a large part, like we could get into Kickstarter theory and marketing theory on fundraisers. There's a point at which the general populace wants to be part of what's cool. And on Kickstarter, once something reaches a threshold, usually once it reaches its goal, you're going to have more people donate after the goal has been reached, simply because it's what everybody else is doing.
Happened to me 2 months ago. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Once you reach the goal, you'll have more people donate. Which is why oftentimes you can set your goal lower and expect to actually reach more than you would on a stretch goal.
Right. And
it's a total psychology. It's a total psychology thing. Like I said, I'm literally one of the panels that I will be sitting on at Gen Con is how did I take my information from tabletop and to the business realm? Nice. What have I learned from the table that is going into business? It's called Business from D&D, I believe.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and I think those are all good points. It's interesting too. I was just thinking about this because really the thing that I think started a little bit of this resurgence was Acquisitions Incorporated, which also reached its own level. But I don't think AQI ever made the crossover out of the gaming community. Like, I think they hit every conceivable gaming area. So we got, WotC specific AQI supplements and obviously the PAX thing. What PAX was already blowing up, so PAX blew up even further, and there's all these live performances. So all of that became a thing.
Correct.
But it never got, I think, to the level where you fund $10 million worth of stuff for an animated show, and you fund within whatever 2 hours or something like that of actually launching the way that Critical Role did. So Critical Role in a way sort of took the ball and ran forward with it, and they're all voice actors, and one of them is an actor who's also on a professional, is a not just a voice actor, but is on Blind Spot.
Like I said, the stars simply aligned for Critical Role.
Yeah.
It's very high end level, and that is not to let me rephrase. That is not to diminish the level of talent that is on that crew.
Yeah.
Like, that is not to diminish their hard work or their crew, but there is a miracle point where those people came together, and the path to where they are now at a multi-million-dollar funded animated show is like, what? Yeah. But at the same time, I would say, I'll make it a guess here. There's a large portion of critters that don't watch anything but Critical Role.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Right?
I think that's true. I mean, the numbers are so enormous that it means that, when people send someone over in another direction, I mean, we got some support for my Forbidden Library Kickstarter from Critical Role people, because one of the people was a critter who went over and posted with other critters. But that's just a numbers game, right? I mean, you have however many thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Some people are going to be interested in other things. But you're right. A lot of people, I think, are just mostly Critical Role fans.
They're just fans. They're fans of the people, the physical people, Matt Mercer. They're fans of their particular story. It's not necessarily about D&D. It is not necessarily about tabletop.
Right.
So it goes back into celebrity realm. You're David Tennant's, you're those kind of things. And so it's just when you look at conventions, you really have to look at what is the audience you're bringing in and how are you bringing them in? And, Gen Con and my Franken Con is really a pie in the sky concept because it truly it would be a very interesting thing to come together. And Rock God, please don't say there are a lot of critters out there that watch a lot of other things. Please do not to take that to say that nobody else does. I am just saying there is a large group of critters that only watch Critical Role, because I have people all the time that goes, oh, how do I get I want fans like Critical Role has, and it's like, well, that's going to be tough because some of those people are not tabletop fans; they're Critical Role fans, and that's kind of a niche. And then you've got some people that bridge both, right? It's the Venn diagram of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are too many cons, like thematic specialization through an overfed community, a general rubber band effect between putting everything under one con and specialize, including things that not everybody likes. Well, right. I mean, that's true, second LBS. Like, a con cannot be all things to all people and probably should not attempt to try. And that's especially true when you're dealing with stuff that is... when you're dealing with cons that have sort of smaller reach, like, or that are sort of focused on different things. ReaderCon that I'm going to be going in Boston is an extremely different con from either Gen Con or Dragon Con. There is zero cosplay at ReaderCon. It does not happen. There used to be zero gaming, although I was joking about the fact that had started to change last year, and then this year they're like, nope, forget that. Whoosh, like games are, again removed. So I hope that gets rethought again as time goes on. But the ReaderCon community in general and that's a con which is about, I want to say maybe somewhere between 700 to 1,000. It's probably, I don't know, it's somewhere between 700 and 1,000 people. So it's not, infinitesimally small, but it's sort of definitely not enormous. That is up in Boston, is very well respected. A number of people, a number of big, guests go there, and are sort of significant, players in the field and so forth. So there's definitely a lot of that going on. And if you go there because you're interested in speculative fiction and speculative literature, you are definitely in the right place. If you're going there to play tabletop games, it's not going to happen probably unless you have friends that do it, and you could do that there or any other hotel if you wanted. And it's definitely not going to be the case if you go for cosplaying. It's just not that's not what they do. So that's a very different kind of feel. And I think that there is a good sort of quality of variety that exists within these cons. So I can go to ReaderCon and I can say this was a good time for what that was, and I can go to International Conference for the Fantastic and the Arts, which is similar to that, and that has its own thing. But then I go to Gen Con and I'm like, my people, and Gen Con it's got its own, that's a different thing sort of additionally. So I think cons can be different things to different people. My question really is when it's obvious that there is overlap, right? When it's obvious that there are people who would like some of these things. Yeah. What do we do about that? Like someone mentioned before, let me actually scroll up about Stephen Colbert. Shout out about like D&D, like Joe Manganiello or Stephen Colbert. I mean, many of you will have seen the one-on-one, which I watched, which was great, of Matt Mercer and Stephen Colbert doing a one-on-one D&D thing for Red Nose Day, basically to benefit that. Now that was great. Why was it great? Because Colbert is a legitimate D&D nerd who really loves D&D and hadn't had a chance to do it for a long time and just had this huge smile on his face. And what I loved about it was there was no snark. There was no, oh, what a funny novelty. All of you were involved. There was no, like, let's watch the funny
He took it super seriously.
Super seriously. Like, none of this, like, let's watch the funny little goldfish swim around the bowl. And Mercer was a little bit starstruck, which was kind of funny. Like, you could tell.
Which is funny because he was starstruck over Mercer.
Right.
It was this adorable thing.
Exactly. That sort of disconnection was that. Colbert was great. I really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. That, to me, demonstrates that there is the potential for this sort of mainstream crossover. And so I guess what I'm wondering out loud is, leaving aside the not one con can be all things to all people, I agree with that. But is there a little bit of a, fiefdom creation that we have where we're like, don't put your peanut butter in my chocolate, don't bring your games over to my cosplay because I want to be in my costumes, or don't bring my costumes. Like, is there that feeling that if you bring this stuff over, Because, like, for example, you would know better than I would. Momocon is largely anime, you said, right?
Yeah, large anime.
I assume there is like manga and some comics there. Is right? Is there sort of like a how dare you bring in comics to my anime con? I don't know if that's the case or not, but it seems to me that there would clearly be overlap for something like that, right? So
Yeah, it's it's funny because you got some like Dragon Con that is the everything to everyone. There's literally a track for freaking everything. And it gets so big that oftentimes some of the tracks suffer in terms of quality of programming. But then you've got like sometimes I go to this local con here called 221B Con, which is just a Sherlock Holmes con. It's just
Okay.
it is about Sherlock Holmes, right?
That's
It's
awesome.
tiny and niche, and Lord, you better not bring anything but Sherlock through the door, right? But I think there is a need to start kind of branching out. Some of it has to do with the fact that there is a very dedicated audience that has been playing this game forever. It has been in tabletop since there was a concept of a tabletop role-playing game.
Yep.
And there is a safety for them in it. And when things change is not always safe. At least the mind will tell you that.
Sure.
And so there is this pushback that goes, don't change this thing. Don't change this thing that I love.
Right.
And when you start having a Rick Sanchez walking by while you're rolling dice in a fantasy world, you've changed it. Right? You've taken from it something that was sacred. And so there is this, I think there is a little bit of I don't know if elitist is the right word, but there is a little bit of this niche that we want to
keep. There's a little cool kids club, about
Yeah,
it.
there is a cool kids club.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've been playing tabletop for about 12 years now, 12, almost 13 years. So I'm definitely not new to it. I was playing it long before I even thought I could ever do it online. I used to force my friends to play just so I could GM. Like
before you were doing panels at Gen Con and the gaming track.
Right.
And,
I've been playing games forever, and I've been telling stories much longer than that because I was an actor and improv actor too. So it just kind of happened. But it's hard. It's really hard to take something that people found a safe haven in and ask it to change or ask it to be different.
Yeah.
No, not that we shouldn't. Not that we shouldn't. But it doesn't make for easy conversation. And I mean, think about it. What would a Gen Con look like if people weren't just dressing in Renaissance fantasy attire? Think about it. The majority of the cosplay that you see at Gen Con is D&D fantasy based.
Yeah. I guess
Right?
That's true.
It
Yeah.
just is.
I guess it's true. Yeah.
Even though I can walk out on the gaming floor and see games that are not just fantasy based.
Right.
Right? Blades in the Dark. I can even get there are tabletop games about cats and Pugmire, and like there could be opportunity for tons of cosplay outside of it.
Right.
I mean, it got brought up earlier. Let's just talk about the fact that Wizards is getting ready to release a Rick and Morty guide, player's
Right.
handbook. It's coming, and I can tell you all about it. I'm very excited. Right? So that is the crossover of this modern day like nerd with the old nerd. I think that book represents everything that is what that could possibly be.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. I was telling somebody I'm considering cosplaying Dakota, my vampire, at Gen Con this year. I'm going to walk around in full on Dakota rage,
Nice.
like super angsty, kindred, gangrel form. And everybody was like, why? Like you can't, it doesn't, somebody was like, oh, but it's not really fantasy. And I was like, well, cosplay attire doesn't have to be fantasy, not at Gen Con.
What?
Like, and so there was this concept of like walking around doing something. I mean, even Gen Con supports it. All of the music that plays in the lobbies that people set up is all Renaissance and medieval music, all of it. So it builds, the convention itself sets the tone as much as the attendees
Yeah,
do.
that's interesting. That's interesting. That's yeah. I mean, that's definitely true that the convention does establish a certain kind of ground rule in terms of the way these things operate. I have to say, like Aaron and the point that you make, I think, is 100% right. And I don't want to get beyond the scope, but no, actually, we're not getting beyond the scope of this. I want to go back to what Dot said, which I think is very, very smart. it's very true that conferences and conventions create a certain impression. I mean, and I, unlike most people probably watching, have done a number of academic conferences and have been, presented papers at the Modern Language Association and the Renaissance Society of America. And I'll tell you right now, academic conferences are also a very different thing, from everything else.
I'm going to Miami for a ticketing conference, marketing and ticketing conference.
Woo!
Real exciting, gang.
Let me tell you that so much time will be spent inside the hotel, I bet, at that con at every off hour. So they have a very sort of different kind of feeling about the way these things work. But I have to say that the sort of, to go back to the cool kids thing, I think that it is a requirement, I think, of a lot of the conventions to try to, as you said, broaden out a little bit what things are actually permitted and not permitted and what things they want to actually see. Which does not mean that they need to become a kind of amorphous, like cookie cutter, everyone has the same kind of Comic-Con with the same, queue list celebrities, and some dude gets the Batmobile because he knows a guy who knows a guy, and like that's your con. Like, I mean, it does not have to all be sort of Generocon, right? You can make it something which is unique. But I think it's an obligation, especially for the gaming community I'll speak about here. If we're going to be a community in which literally we talk about the idea of, as you always say, storytelling, and I would add into that the idea of what if. What if we were someone different? What if we played different roles? What if we were different people? What if we lived at a different time? I don't think it is compatible to say, what if X, Y, and Z, and then say, but definitely not if played by A, B, and C, or people who are dressed like D, E, and F. If you're in a genre and in a sort of society that is about changing the way that we think about so-called what is considered normal and altering our vision of the way that the world could be based upon the games we play and the roles that we play, then we're under an obligation to broaden those things out in many directions, it seems to me, and not just kind of limited to the sort of Renaissance, this is the only thing that we're going to do. Like, my favorite, game of all time is Dungeons and Dragons. I think 5th edition is the best edition they ever produced. So I'm a D&D 5e guy, but I also talked about earlier today Hearts of Wulin. I also run Adventures of Middle-earth. I also run Esper Genesis. I have also done what, Dot has been in before and hopefully will be again once I get it recast, which is Simon Impossible, which is based on not at all D&D. We have all done these sort of different systems, and I don't feel like my love for D&D is threatened by the fact that I play Scum and Villainy and Blades in the Dark or whatever the case may be. And that, I think, is something which a convention, to bring it back to the topic, that's what a convention can do. I think a convention can bring people together and say, let's try in a safe environment different things without having to make it. It's not like Gen Con is never going to become Dragon Con, right? It's never going to lose the, playing with people around a table in these huge halls with a bunch of like ballroom tables that are set up with. That's never going to go away completely. That's never going to vanish. But they could make, gestures in that direction. They could do more in that way. And I would like to see that. I mean, like the vampire thing, it kills me that they'd be like, well, why would you do that? White Wolf is producing Vampire the Masquerade stuff not that long after Dungeons and Dragons comes out. It's a late 80s thing. Yeah. So it's not like,
forever. And it hit its peak in the 90s. Like, let's be real. And then you hit the video game and it was just like,
these people are just like,
it's interesting actually. I was telling Arv earlier, I started out as a cosplayer. When I started my Twitch channel, I was building cosplay. Okay. So I have a deep-seated love of cosplay, though I'm too tired and to really put as much effort anymore. But all of that to be said, at D&D Live, one of the most brilliant things that Wizards did, the thing to me that I think nailed the vibe, right? If we're talking about setting the tone, the atmosphere, is they hired entertainers. They hired entertainers to come in and play these characters. Right. They brought in makeup artists, and you had these incredible creatures and demons walking around you inside of the setting of basically Baldur's Gate. And then Avernus later in the weekend kind of changed over to hell. It was freaking awesome. It was freaking awesome. Could you imagine if Gen Con was like, hey, why don't we have a special budget this year? We're going to hire cosplayers, let's say, and we're going to give each of them a tabletop setting, a Vampire the Masquerade, 3 or 5 of them get D&D, and they are just characters from these tabletop games, and they're walking around. One from Blades in the Dark, maybe one from a bizarre cipher system. Maybe we get some kind of cyberpunk, right? So that you're seeing these people walking around. That's setting precedence for the comfortability level of how you can inspire your attendees to bring their cosplay or to bring their thing or to do their thing.
Yep.
It's really strange because, again, it's like the little gesture of all the music in the lobby being
and I never even thought about that, but you're right. I mean, that's absolutely
which feels like a Ren Fair.
Sure.
And therefore leans towards D&D, which is fine. We all know D&D is what got us here.
But it's not going anywhere is the thing.
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room already. I mean, and it's not even like it's a fit. Gen Con is its own thing. It's not even like Wizards, there were a couple of years where Wizards wasn't even there, which was, I thought, absurd. And then Wizards was like, wait, that's a dumb idea. We need to go back to Gen Con, which they started doing. But, right. D&D is the big elephant in the room. It's not going to go anywhere. No one is going to be hurt by the addition or inclusion of these other sort of properties. And I would say that there's a sort of larger point here, which I think conventions can provide, which is the benefit of getting people together in a more diverse environment to be able to play with people that they wouldn't do otherwise. Like, for example, I want to say about a year ago on Hyper RPG, they had a Black Panther RPG session that I was watching played, which was awesome. It was an entirely African-American cast. It was badass, and it was unadulterated joy. So I'm sure it was joy that I was watching. So it was spectacular because, normally when people are having a wonderful time and are really into stuff, it's amazing how much people respond to that. Right. So, and then you had a couple of the typical, like a couple of trolls who pop in and is like, oh, not really much diversity if blah, 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 blah. I'm like, not the point.
Missed it.
Trying to learn about intersectionality and representation. But anyway, so the idea was that was extraordinary. Why exactly does that have to wait for a channel, a decently prominent channel, but still a channel on Twitch, to be able to manage that? That is the kind of thing that a conference like, and I'm not singling out Gen Con here, but many of them could have done a long time ago. Why could you not sponsor an event on a Black Panther RPG or an event which focused on, LGBTQ or whatever else the case may be, that was focusing on games that had, I mentioned the Hearts of Wulin thing that at Wish Out Theater. Why are those things not things that we can also promote without any fear that that's going to mean that somehow it's going to become, within the next 2 years, they're not going to be playing D&D anymore? I'm like, that's just nonsense. Like, D&D is always going to be the big elephant in the room. Paizo has learned this, which is why Paizo is now starting to produce things for WotC in D&D, because they've seen the writing on the wall just like everybody else has. It's not that Paizo puts out bad stuff. It's that D&D came first and just hit at the right cultural moment, and it is what it is.
The stars aligned.
The stars aligned. So, but from my point of view, there's no reason that we can't push this at something like a convention and conference, and that would be all to the good. I just think more access, more inclusion, more opportunity is just in general terms, is a good thing. It improves the hobby as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. So I would like to see cons do that. And not just Gen Con, lots of these different cons.
Lots of the cons. I would say Gen Con is actually doing a pretty good job. I think PAX did a couple great panels this year too.
Yeah.
Like there was some great panels at PAX, of representation that were there. Different music in the lobby because clearly Dot keeps harping on it. Clearly we know what drives me nuts, makes my eye twitch. But I think we're in the right path, and there are a lot of fan-driven panels that have the diversity level, but at the convention level.
Yeah, exactly.
At the big panels.
Exactly.
Yeah, at the big panels. I want to see something really freaking interesting. Actually, Pro Restarter is running a Afrofuturism game.
Awesome.
Over on his channel right now, and it is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll bet it is.
So cool. I'm with you on that. I think the conclusion we've come to is that when a con hits a certain size, at least for me, when a convention hits a certain size and you have a fan base as large as somebody like Gen Con or Dragon Con, you have a role as a leader in the community.
That's it.
To reach audiences at their lowest hanging fruit and the highest hanging fruit.
That's
right.
It.
You have to, because it's that responsibility of supporting not only your critical roles and your Dungeons and Dragons, but also your small scale indie game designers, because that's
100%.
also part of the market.
100%. And I would like to see them, yeah, I'd like to see them be able to do more of that. And I think you're right. And again, I love Gen Con, and I will never stop loving Gen Con. And I do agree that they've done a lot of things very, very well. I think Gen Con tries hard, and I think that that's good. Not in they're tryhards. I mean, they are trying hard to continually push things forward. And
Gen Con, the brown noser.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very much like I would sort of make the analogy to the way that it works in my day job field as an academic. The reality is that in this country, when the Ivy Leagues decide to do something, every other college and university, all the way down to the community colleges, I only mean down in terms of like all the way down in terms of affordability, eventually follow suit.
Yep.
So if Harvard tomorrow said, we are not going to charge tuition anymore because we have an endowment, you would see every single college and university scrambling to follow suit. Now, they would not all be capable of doing it because they don't all have Harvard's endowment, but they would all start to move in that direction, especially if, as is the case for at least the top 30 universities or so, you don't need tuition for most of these to survive. Their endowments will sustain many of these places, and the money that would be saved would allow more financial aid to go to other places, and so on and so on. I don't want to get on a tangent, but the point is they have a responsibility as leaders, the Harvards, the Yales, the Princetons, the Columbias. They have a responsibility to set the tone because they will never go out of business. If Harvard stops tomorrow, it's not like going to be like, well, Harvard is screwed. They're not screwed. They're
not, right.
Harvard. They will not ever go anywhere.
Been here forever.
Yeah, they've been here for the founding of the nation. They will not go anywhere. And so that's the same thing with Gen Con. If Gen Con says, it's like the famous Gen Con says we're going to do this, and you get the small, tiny percentage. It's like, oh, well, the last time they get my money. And I'm like, right, enjoy 700 people waiting to take your place, they are not going to be in any financial danger. So I would like to see them. It's more sort of a from friend to friend, a gentle push to the larger conventions to get on board with trying to be, and I'm not just talking diversity in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of orientation. I'm also talking about diversity in terms of game choice, in terms of type of game being played, in terms of narrative versus more war game based, or in terms of something which is set, alternate history versus, as you said, Afrofuturism. Diversity
GM-less games.
GM-less games, yes. Diversity of game choice too. And I'd like to see some of the big, granddaddies in the room be able to make some of those decisions. Another one that could do this at this point, even though it's not very old, is PAX, because PAX Unplugged, because it's backed up by these other things, is already enormous. And so PAX Unplugged could do this too. And PAX Unplugged is not going to go away. People are not going to boycott PAX en masse because they decided that they were going to host, for example, a couple of Black Panther, RPGs. It just will not happen. So, and hosting it doesn't mean you put a table and say, well, we do Black Panther. It's exactly as Dot says. You go and you hire professionals who, trust me, would love to do this. If you're like, you will pay me. Yes. So I'd like to see them set the tone. And I guess I hadn't thought we would go in this direction, but it's a really good direction. Provide leadership. So that we, in our home games, on Twitch, in these various places, can sort of replicate and follow the inspiration of what we see on the conference or convention level.
Because think about it. I talk about Gen Con all year long. So it really does set the tone for me. And it helps me choose the games I want to run, the stuff I want to play.
Yep.
And so it really is this kind of very poignant opportunity to just be different. And I'm like not picking on Gen Con. I freaking love Gen Con.
Yeah, I know I do. I adore it. So
I adore it.
My favorite.
I will be there. I'm driving.
Convention.
I will be there. For sure. But yeah, I think there is this interesting shift that could happen, and maybe we're seeing it happen, and it's just a slow shift.
Well, we push it, right? I mean, like it's people like us that push it. It's like, FDR said, someone basically came to him and said, I want this, this, and this. And he said, great, make me do it. And his point was not make me do it like, he didn't say it like, make me do it, haha. He said, like, push me to do it because the president requires the people to push in certain directions, especially now, to push in certain directions. I'm sorry. But, you know, to push in certain directions to kind of move the country forward. And that's the same thing here. It's our obligation as people who do this, I think, to push them a little bit and to know that we're doing this with a good actor. I think Gen Con is largely a good actor. I think Origins is largely a good actor. I think these
I think
places
PAX is also,
PAX is also. I think they're largely good actors. It doesn't mean they're flawless, but I think they're trying to go in the right direction. So we are applauding when they do that the right way, but also saying, please continue to go further, because I would just, I don't know, I just see so much diversity of game choice from folks, you know, like you and a bunch of the people that I've met through the tabletop community on Twitch, and I want to see more of that, you know, brought into this environment. So
you know, it's interesting. I'm going to think on one thing. I know we're just like way off on a tangent, and I'm just yakking now. This is what you get when we don't get a guest. Dot doesn't shut up when you don't bring a guest on. So no, so it's
I'll take the hit.
yeah, it's I liken conventions a lot to nonprofits. So I've always worked in nonprofits. That's just what I've done. It's at my core, specifically in the arts and the creative sector. And when we need something, when a nonprofit is at a point of change, or we're looking to diversify or to expand, we partner. Conventions are these very insular things, and they bring in all of these outside people. But, you know, I'd be really interested, you know, if Dragon Con, example, wants to really rev up their tabletop section and get better at it, why wouldn't you reach out to Gen Con and say, teach us what you do?
Yep.
There's been this really interesting trend that's been happening with concerts. I'm also like a total concert freakazoid. I spend my summer at festivals all over. And so it's really interesting because festivals now are having to do a lot of training around safety. You have a lot of very inebriated people enjoying themselves at a very, like, up to 11. We have been turned up to 11, and things happen. But what's happening is these concert companies come in, just the company, and they put on a concert. And they fail to plan for all the safe pieces that need to be there. Now they're doing more and more of that. But what they've had to do is these festival companies that just plan concerts, that's all they do.
Right.
They have to partner with somebody that specializes in what they do, in that aspect of keeping people safe, and in assuring that there are places for people that might be having a bad trip or a bad time, right? This is training. I think that our conventions could use the same thing.
Yep.
I think that our conventions are in a place, if we want to see that shift and we want to see that change, it's time for a little bit of partnership. A little bit of reaching out here and saying, well, we want to do what you do, and I want to do what you do. Like, it's just part of it. And I really do consider conventions to be part of a service industry. They are for-profit, not nonprofit, but that concept of giving and doing what you do for the people is there.
I agree 100%, and I actually want to amplify that for a minute. When you see a well-run conference or convention, and you know the people that are behind it, and then you experience ones that are not that way, the difference is sort of striking. And the reason that you know that the one that doesn't handle it well could do better is because of the experience you've had with the ones that do, you know, handle it very well. And a lot of it has to do, frankly, with a certain commitment to professionalism on the part of not just the convention, but the people who are involved in the job. I have enormous admiration for the volunteers that make this possible. I am incredibly, you know, admiring of people that I consider to be, you know, close friends and wonderful people in Melanie Metters and Kelly Swales. Melanie actually did some publicity work for me individually as an author, and I consider her definitely a friend. Kelly has been a dear friend of mine for years and years, and we've done workshops together and all that. They do a spectacular job, along with Mark Tassin, who took over from Gene Raby, who doesn't matter. They're all great people, and they did amazing, amazing work with the symposium. They run it well. They are responsive. They respond when criticism happens. They address it without incredible defensiveness. They, at the same time, they don't go running around like chickens with their heads cut off, responding to every conceivable troll comment.
Right.
They do it really, really well. And so one of the things that I think does need to happen is an understanding that it's not enough to say so-and-so is a volunteer and they're not getting paid for this. And and then they trail off. And I guess the assumption is, and so therefore the convention can be crappy. No. Yeah. If you are a volunteer, and I've volunteered myself at these things, your obligation, Shattermage, one of our regular mods in here, does a lot of volunteering for a convention in Detroit, an anime convention, which I can't remember the name of now. But anyway, and has done tons and tons of work and like moved up the ranks in terms of like his status. And, you know, he's an airline pilot, okay, is his normal job. He doesn't get paid to do the volunteer work. I can promise you, though, he doesn't blow it off and be like, yeah, well, I'm not getting paid anyway, whatever. Like,
well, I'm only going to half-ass it.
Exactly. If you were a volunteer and you are working for this, it's your obligation, I think, to put in the same amount of effort you would under any other circumstances, or don't volunteer. And that's perfectly reasonable position. But if you're going to do it, then you really have to kind of push something forward, you know, in a positive and professional way.
Yeah.
And I mention that because many volunteers do exactly that. Many of the volunteers who work at Gen Con that I've known for many years are amazing, and not just Melanie and Kelly. Everybody in that staff is amazing. Lots of people who do work at ReaderCon do a wonderful job, who do work at ICFA do a wonderful job, at Farpoint, at many others of these examples. CanCon is an incredible convention in Canada, which is not super large, but is really well run. So it's possible to do it, okay? So I'm not criticizing, you know, volunteers, but I am saying that the mindset that says, well, there are volunteers and it's all just kind of haphazard and so you kind of got to just sort of go loosey-goosey. This is absurd. And that's where what Dot said about learning from other conventions could really come into play. Okay, so you don't have the money and the resources of a Gen Con, but you're also not catering to 70,000 people. You can run a con that caters to 200 people by taking a look at other successful ones, at looking at something like Gamehole Con, which is not that small, but is definitely smaller, or looking at Farpoint, or looking at one of these other regional small, or MomoCon, you might say, a regional con that does a lot of things well and can learn from them so that the overall experience is raised for everybody. So I think good conventions, whether they're large or small, and whether they're volunteer driven or, as in the case of Gen Con, a mix of volunteers and then a lot of paid people, they can still be run well or not well, and being a volunteer or not should not be material to that question. So, you know, exactly, Erdina, like you're giving your word to do your best. And as I say, most volunteers will do that, but I just don't think the attitude sometimes from the convention higher ups at some cons, which is kind of like, well, it's a labor of love, it's a volunteer thing. Well, then if it's a joke, then don't do it. But if you're going to do it,
I'll tell you what,
you know.
It sounds a lot. I consider cons like they're part of cultural events, really. When you look at a city,
sure,
they're considered part of tourism, and tourism,
right?
Yeah, and tourism, no matter pretty much what city in the U.S. is considered part of the cultural side of what a city does. They're budgeting, all of that kind of stuff, right? Don't get me in my city planning. But it's important to say that because the arts are also considered cultural. Sports are also considered cultural. So when you look at these things together in a lumping, we say that about everything. Oh, well, it's just art. Or, oh, well, it's like, you know, like you were saying, well, they're not being paid, so it doesn't really matter. So we kind of give this excuse. But that's a great example. Like, what if our Doctors for Borders were like, we're not being paid 50% more, you know, fatality rate. Right? And it's like, it doesn't work like that. So
Aren't
why are
you grateful that we're operating poorly on, you know, whatever. Yeah. And I mean, it definitely is a piece of labor of love. But, you know, as the artist that has done my fair share of unpaid internships, those two were labors of love that I gave everything for. And so I think that there's this really interesting place where we're walking a fine line, where you have cons. Dragon Con, the second largest convention in the country, is 95% led by volunteers. That is not always a good thing. And I say that openly. Now, Dragon Con will tell you it couldn't do what it did if it had to pay every person. I would rightfully say that, sure, the head people of Dragon Con would not make the paycheck that they make anymore. Right? Which is a tough thing for me to say. And please, you know, strike me down, the gods of Dragon Con. But it's true. They have a very specific purpose. That thing has been run by volunteers forever. At what point does your con, once again, have a responsibility to provide quality programming and to pay the people that spend their year providing it? Now, that's a whole separate conversation we can have, but there is something to be said for payment equaling quality. Not that it always has to. And some volunteers just do it out of the kindness of their hearts. And you guys are the real unsung heroes. Like, let's put that out there. For real.
For real, because you're giving everything you've got for nothing but the joy of what you do. And there's something really beautiful in that. But there's also something to be said for recognizing at what point your event, your con, your cultural whatever has outgrown the existence of just running via volunteers.
Right.
Gen Con pays people.
Right. Right. And not accepting that, the quality is going to be lesser because we don't have paid people anyway, and so blah 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 blah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's extraordinarily important to try to pay people at all costs whenever you can. I no question about it. And that's like, you try to do the best you can. I pay our vocalists. I would like to pay. It's a pittance. It's a joke. I wish I could pay more, but I am trying because I think it's important to pay creatives. The overlay stuff that you see 9 times out of 10 is not done by volunteers. It's done by people that I pay. I still want to do more, but I think it's important to do that. So I agree that I think that these places should be paying more and should figure out ways to, be able to make that happen. But I think if at a certain point, regardless of how it's structured, volunteer versus paid, the experience on the consumer end still needs to be the same for them. And I don't think we can accept lesser standards because we say, well, I mean, this is like largely volunteer run. And so because of that, we can all kind of let it.
But you're still charging me a full ticket price.
Yeah, exactly. So start right. Let them come for free. And then you can talk about how it's all a bunch of, whatever, we all have a good time and it's all loose. But as long as you're going to pay a full ticket price, who cares that it's all volunteers? Who cares that it's got anything to do with anything else? Or, and again, and I'm not, in this case, I'm not blaming the volunteers. I'm blaming the sort of convention people, the heads of these people that think it's okay to have it sort of be a shoddy job because we didn't pay them anyway, and it's the volunteers that are in.
Because we're settling, basically.
So and again, my point, well, I appreciate that, Rock. I appreciate that. You're all lovely people too. My point was not to sort of go fishing for, yay, Arv is this. My point was simply that I think it's, as a creative myself, I think it's important to get paid for things that you do when possible. But there are also things that I volunteer for that I try to put my absolute effort into, regardless of what I'm getting paid for it. Example, ArvCon, right? I put a lot of work into that, and all the mods in here who do not get paid, and I wish I could afford to pay them, and they don't get paid, and I'm working on trying to get to the point where I can. They put in a ton of work. Like, good God, how much work did Shadowed Mage and Aradinel and Dragonspear, who put together the freaking list of like giveaway raffle items and like in a spreadsheet, and like it's ridiculous. And every streamer will tell you the same thing. I bet Dot would say the same thing about our mods, about people that just show up and do it for the love. I mean, so I have nothing but admiration for people who do that, precisely because they don't say, oh, whatever. They don't like Shadowed and Aradinel and Dragonspear and all my amazing mods, all my regular viewers too, did not say like, whatever, we're not getting paid for it. So like charity, who cares? Right. Like, they freaking sacrifice time and effort and, so I just think it's important that conventions set the tone for that by A, paying more people when they can, and B, when it is volunteer, emphasizing that B, they incredibly admire volunteers and they're going to at least comp them if they can, like tickets to the con, and they're going to at least do whatever they can, and they're going to work towards payment, just all those sorts of things. And then hold them to a standard and hold the convention to a standard, regardless if it's volunteer run or professional run.
Right, absolutely.
So, and I agree with you, Trooper, by the way, that I wanted to say something very quickly about the thing about teaching at a prison. First of all, that is amazing. And as a long time, person who's taught for well over 20 years, almost 25 years in many different environments, including inner city high schools and a lot of that stuff, I have enormous admiration for that. I'm glad you're doing that. Thank you for doing that. And I agree with you that people should get paid for that kind of work, especially teachers, my God. So I agree with you 100% about that. I think burnout can be a thing. I'm just saying that at the point that this is not a volunteer thing, it's really more of a convention thing. You need to set a standard regardless. You need to pay people as much as you can. And when you do have volunteers, you need to make sure that the standard that is being upheld is still a high standard for the people that are paying for tickets still. Because that, I think, is really important to be able to provide that. So also important is the fact that we have gone on for a very long time about a really interesting topic that I really had fun with, but I do want to make sure we get to other stuff so I don't keep poor Dot for 6 trillion hours. But yeah, feel free for folks to bring up this stuff, as well when you're dealing with the questions afterwards, because I thought I really actually enjoyed that conversation. Okay, so the other question, or the other thing we wanted to talk about, here we go. was about product review. So I want to talk about one thing, and then I'll throw it over to Dot for hers. I want to talk about Hearts of Wulin. Yeah, exactly, Trooper. But I know some cons where they do. They volunteer and they have to pay to get in.
Yes.
That's wrong. I mean, just flat wrong.
Some conventions will do it where you have to volunteer. So like Dragon Con, you have to volunteer 25 hours in a weekend to qualify for a volunteer badge.
Damn, I didn't know it was that much. Wow.
25 hours. I was like, oh, next year I'll run some tables. I thought probably 2 or 3 games. 25 hours in my weekend at Dragon Con required me to run, what is that, over 4 days, 5 days? So basically crazy. 2 games a day for all 4 days.
And isn't Dragon Con for profit? I don't think they're nonprofit, are they?
Yeah, no.
Wow.
Yep. So 25 hours. And I was like, what convention? I'll never see it. It's the same thing. I'm in discussions right now with a company that wants to pay for my whole Gen Con trip. And it's a fantastic offer, except I've got to run 2 4-hour games every day.
Wow.
I don't see any of the convention.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's a hard sell because I can still go and I can still run 1 or 2 games and still volunteering my time, but it's not enough to qualify for a badge. It's not enough, That's absurd.
Yeah, that's insane. But that, so I've heard stories like that, basically, is the point. So, yeah, anyway, interesting. To be continued. I think this will be important, especially when we get all the cons. It's like, we heard you had some problems with the way that we've been running things. Which we're like, yeah, we'd say it again. What's up? No, we don't. I mean, as I say, what we're really doing is kind of pushing some of these places to be even better. And in the case of Gen Con, which I think does try to do things the right way and generally does, they could be better too. And that's not anything against them. It's just sort of as a friend to a friend, here's some other things you could do. And there's other examples of that, of cons that don't do the job nearly as well and could do better than they're doing right now. And that also needs to be sort of taken into account. So, yeah, exactly. 3-4 hour slots the whole con and you get your badge reimbursed. Exactly. And don't tell me, yes, Gen Con is bigger in terms of money than Dragon Con, but Dragon Con, as Dot just pointed out, is enormous and has a ton of people. So don't tell me that they can't figure out a way to be able to...
Over 100,000 of them.
That's outrageous. Yeah, that's... Wow.
In Atlanta.
Yep.
It's outrageous. It is. There are so many people at Dragon Con.
Wow, that's crazy. Anyway, yeah. So, wow, interesting. I'm sort of gobsmacked because I've been, as I said, I've been on panels at Dragon Con, but I was just part of the Tolkien track and I didn't know any of that. For a panel participant, I think I got my tickets comped to the con, but I didn't get my hotel room or anything else comped. But as a volunteer not having that's interesting. Huh. Anyway, so Ramsey 1/16. Yeah.
Wait.
Exactly, Ardeno, yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this thing, which I have just put up there right now, and that is Hearts of Wulin. So those of you who had a chance to watch this during ArvCon on Saturday, I've already talked a little bit about it. So again, Wuxiao Theater. I just want to give a shout out to them because I really liked this game. Lowell Francis was the GM. And I like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I happen to have a deep love for Kung Fu films and a particular admiration for Bruce Lee. Not quite the same thing, but in the same ballpark. But just the sort of nature of what this was really was a lot of fun to me. And partly the players did a great job, so it was great to see it happen. But I also just think it was a lot of fun, just sort of the kind of cinematic stuff that was involved here. So basically, this is based on Powered by the Apocalypse. It is based on that system. And it is currently on Kickstarter. They funded within an hour. So they had a 5,000 goal. They funded in an hour. And they are now up to almost $25,000, 825 backers. Oh my God. Aradinel with a tier 1 sub to Trooper SJP. Aradinel, who is being far too generous again. But thank you, Aradinel. Thank you, dude. That's very kind of you. Wow. All right, Trooper. So you're now a gift sub. Stay a while and listen. And Specchio has subscribed at tier 2 for 24 months. The 2 years. Oh my God. Specchio with the resub. You realize, Trooper, that now means that you're now obligated to remain sub to me forever. No, I'm just kidding. It's a complete joke. But thank
how
you.
they do that.
Yeah, that's how that works. No, but thank you, Erdinel. That was very kind of you. I appreciate it. And Specchio, thank you for the resub, dude. The tier 2 resub, 24 months. That is like super nice. So thank you. That's very kind of you. Let's see. Thank you also to Trooper, who literally followed the channel after becoming a sub. It's really funny. He's like, got the thing. He's like, oh, quick, follow. But anyway, yeah, so they made almost 25,825 backers. They've got still 15 days to go. So they did a great job with this. And the way I found out about it is the fact that, Lowell Francis, who was Lowell Francis, is Cat Rambo's brother. So she told me, she's like, oh, my brother is doing this Kickstarter and blah, 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 blah. So I went over and I looked, I'm like, I'll do you one better, actually. I kind of need a special event for ArvCon. Would you like to do that? And he was like, yes, I would. So it ended up working really well. So it's over here. One of the things I like about it is very narrative driven. It's very theater of the mind, but it is very much within its setting. So what I like about Tolkien and Adventures of Middle-earth is it feels so much like Tolkien with the corruption mechanic, the journey mechanic. It just feels like you are in Middle-earth. It does not feel like standard D&D. Espergenesis feels very space-oriented, very Mass Effect-y. Again, not in the least sort of D&D, other than the fact that the rule set is obviously the same. So Hearts of Wulin is very much like that for me, in that it's a game that under other contexts, you might just be like, oh, come on, really? Like, why? What is this sort of overwrought, melodramatic? But it's literally melodrama. Like, it's intended to be melodrama. So, of course, nobody says what they really think about someone else. And, of course, someone that you defeat in a tea house because you were half drunk, and then they come after you because you once said to their sister that you liked them even though you were saying it for your friend. Like, whatever. Like, it's absurd and ridiculous, and it just goes for it. It just embraces the ridiculous. And I really like that. Also, a lot of really beautiful art that you can see that's being produced here. Just a really well put together game that obviously is a labor of love and obviously feels like it's the Gauntlet community that actually put this together, the Gauntlet gaming community. Obviously, they really cared about this game, and that kind of shows. So you should go over there and give them some love if you were interested in this kind of system and this kind of setting at all. Hearts of Wulin, it is on there for another 15 days. You may be hearing more about that, he said archly, connected to channels and things down the line. We'll see if that's the case. But anyway, it's really cool. It's really, really neat. Is Michelle Yee in this game? No, but I don't, she should be. They used a lot of reference points, though, of people that you would expect. So there was a lot of references to the Chow Yun Fats of the world, and the that kind of thing. So, even a little bit of maybe Sonny Chiba, which is a reference I bet a lot of people will not get. Yeah, it's like Shakespeare 80s soap opera tossed in with kung fu. Yes, exactly. I don't know about dubbed in Vietnamese, but maybe we could sort of make that work nonstop. That might be good. Anyway, highly recommended. Good stuff. You should check that out. So that's my product review for the day. Dot, do you have one that you would like us to take a look at?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry, cat. I didn't mean to scare you.
Your product review is your cat.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. I'm always playing games in business, right? Okay. So my new favorite thing that I've received, I played it at Momo this weekend. I'm obsessed with it. So first off, there is a roll. This game is available currently now on Roll20.
Okay.
So if you play online stuff, you can go right now and get it. But you should play it in person with people. It is a GM-less card-based game called For the Queen.
I've heard of this.
Okay. I may have mentioned it before.
I haven't played it, but I've heard of it.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so this is the one I'm going to talk about because I've been playing a lot of it lately, and I'm pretty much in love with it. So it's called For the Queen. It's available on Roll20. It's very inexpensive, and you get the whole kit and caboodle. It uses the card system in Roll20. Very easy to do. Super neato. Okay, so the premise is very simple. One of the first things that I absolutely love about it is there's an X card on the table. It's like there. So if you're playing in person and just tap that X card, right? Which is really neat. And the game and the instructions, which you go around in a circle and like read. There's literally an instructions deck, and you like deal them out, and everybody goes around and reads the instructions out loud. And the instructions are partly instructions and partly story. It like prompts the story basically. Okay. So I'll give you. There's a small one here. I got my deck. I wish I had the box, but I got a early set from Evil Hat themselves. So they were like, we don't have boxes yet. They're not done printing it. I was like, send me the cards anyways. So basically you go around and this is your prompt. The land you live in has been at war for as long as any of you have been alive. The queen has decided to undertake a long and perilous journey to broker an alliance with a distant power. She has chosen all of you and no one else to be her retinue and to accompany her on this journey. She has chosen you because she knows that you love her. That is the game prompt. Every game starts the same way. And then you draw from these incredibly beautiful, what we call the queen cards. I'm going to show you guys. One of the things I love about this is they used all female artists to design the queen cards, and all of them done by a different artist.
Okay.
So the queens are just incredible. So you randomly draw your queen.
I think this is going to release at Origins, by the way. It looks like June 2019. So
yeah, it'll be Origins where you'll be able to get yours. So you can technically pre-order your cards now. Like, look at this queen. Like, I want to know her. Oh, look at that. She's so beautiful. The art is so beautiful. So then you randomly draw a queen. And then from there, you basically have a deck of questions. That's what I call it, the deck of questions. Okay. They call it prompts. And you shuffle it and you start going through them. And the first person going clockwise reads the first question. When was the last time the queen hurt you? And the entire game is going through and answering the questions. Now, I've played this game where it has manifested as like a soap opera, where it got really dramatic. There is no character building except for what you do immediately at the table. So I think the last time I mentioned this, like, it was really funny because nobody could come up with a name for their character. So everybody started riffing on their own name. So I became Lady Dottie Rouge, which has now become this like NPC in my other games, this whole NPC. So I was Lady Dottie Rouge, like on the spot. Nice. But it turned into this hilarious, like super hysterical, like total soap opera, like kind of a comedy-based like satire on Game of Thrones when we did it. Okay. I've played it where it was more interview style, which was also really cool. So it didn't play like scene to scene between characters. It was more like The Office where you talk to a camera, which was also a really cool gameplay. So like it has played different every time I've played it. And to see what people come up with based on these prompts, which are just so bizarre. You're considered beautiful by almost everyone. How does the queen make you question that perception? Like, what a great question. Yeah. That just prompts like story. And then when everybody, like these things start becoming canon and then the story gets deeper and wider and wider and the more questions you add. And because the X card's on the table, it actually says at any point, if somebody says something that you don't want to be part of the story, you simply tap the X card and it goes back and it removes that thing from the story. So it could be based on safety at the table, or it could simply be like somebody was like, oh, well, the queen and I slept together. No, you didn't. Right. And so it's this really interesting gameplay where it's not that you're pinned against one another, but that you are actually forced together to tell the story of this voyage. And then the game ends when you draw the queen is under attack. Do you protect her? And then the end of the story is whether or not, after all the information has come out, whatever story you've told, do you choose to protect the queen? That's neat. It's a really cool game. I'm in love with it.
That's neat. So it really is a collaborative experience game more than a, like, you know, there's not winners or losers per se in the way that it actually operates. Yeah, and that also, that questioning style is something which Hearts of Lynn was also doing a lot of, like tons and tons of, you know, the how does that, so how do you do this particular thing? Why would you do it this way? You know, have you been drawn to this place by a particular thing? You know, so it's very much in that kind of mode. And it sounds like there's a lot of that sort of questioning. I like the idea of the GM-less stuff. I think the GM-less games are actually valuable because I think they teach everybody to be better GMs and players as well. You know, in addition to its own value, you know, you may or may not like GM or not, but playing through GM-less games is valuable for everybody, even if you generally play in GM'd games, because it makes you better able to understand how the GM handles things, and also as a GM gives you ideas that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. So Wulin meets Cards Against Humanity in a really novel way. It sounds like it, except when you don't feel dirty afterwards for having played
Correct.
it.
Right. You don't have to worry about your mom walking in the room.
I won a Cards Against Humanity game once, and we will never talk about that. I feel like a horrible human being that I won it. You should not win. If you win a Cards Against Humanity game, you have some questioning of self to do, which I had to do at the time. It was a group of other authors. It was after a long week. What can I tell you? But I can also confirm that Cameron Hurley, who's a well-known fantasy author herself, also won one of these. So I have mutually assured destruction. And then if anyone is ever like, well, what about this? I could be like, what about Cameron? And, you know, it would be great.
I'm gonna see what else have I got. I think that's really the big one right now. What else I got back here on my?
You would like to see a special stream. You keep looking. I'm sorry. I'm just responding to Rock On. I would like to see a special stream of that game. Arv. You would like to see Dot play For the Queen hosted on my channel sometime, maybe? Did you just ask whether Dot would ever do a For the Queen thing on my channel? Did I hear that from you? You also, I'm being driven by forces beyond my understanding, Dot, to ask.
Your hand is just being just led.
I mean, it's always weird because I always know, because I mean, you know, Dot obviously has a very, you know, good, solid community herself in her own channel. So I don't want to like take you away from it, but I would
I'd
love
to run a game. It's so much fun. Plus, I already got it set up on Roll20. You just gotta log in. Okay. It's the easiest setup ever.
We got to talk about that
and do it. We definitely will. We should run.
Where we should do that? We should do this before this. We should try to do this maybe sometime in July. But you know where we should absolutely try to do this is at Gen Con. We should try to find a time where we could actually live stream it at Gen Con. You just like with just my phone. Like, I mean, you wouldn't even need like a big setup. You just no. Right? Like, you don't have to have Roll20.
Yeah. We could do that. Yeah, you wouldn't even need, you technically wouldn't, like, because it's a card game. I broke it out twice, actually, at Momo. I was like, hey, you guys want to play a game? And what's cool is it prompts you, like, you actually are allowed to go through, find the card that ends the game, and if you want a shorter game, you just slot the card top to the deck. You want a longer game, you slot it lower in the deck. It's brilliant.
Right,
like I played two 30-minute games, and I was like, this is perfect. Like, it just got everybody like warmed up and like excited to be there. And then we drank a lot. And we played another version. It was
okay. So we will talk about that. We will talk about the possibility of doing this sometime over the next couple of months on Roll20. But then also, like, seriously, let's talk about the possibility of doing that at Gen Con.
We probably could totally make that happen. I mean, we just need a camera because the cards are on the table. So
okay, all right. Cool. I dig it. You want to see Cards Against Humanity on my stream as well, Arv? No, that will never occur under any circumstances because I value my family, my career, and my friendships. And so no, I appreciate the request, and it is denied utterly and vetoed to the Stone Age. Not a chance. And Dot knows what I'm talking about because she's played Cards Against Humanity. If you played it, you don't stream it if you want to be a functional human being.
I used to work for this entirely volunteer Shakespeare company, speaking of volunteering, Shakespeare company here in Atlanta. And every one of our opening night parties consisted of alcohol and Cards Against Humanity. And let me tell you what, when you get a bunch of actors in a room to play Cards Against Humanity, one, boy, does it become competitive. And two, things are said, card combinations are made that you cannot take back.
Nope.
Once they are out there, they are out there.
I'm telling you, I remember walking out of the South Park movie and having my mother ask me how it was, and me being like, I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you how the South Park movie was, because if I told you, I feel bad that I found part of it funny, and yet I did. So that is very similar to Cards Against Humanity. You just can't. What happens in Cards Against Humanity stays in Cards Against Humanity. Anyway.
Oh, man. Oh, I do have one more game. I finally play tested the Breakfast Cult I've been talking about.
Oh, you did. So how did it come across?
So that's what I played at Momo.
Okay.
From the booth. So that's what we did for my Sunday Fun Day. It was great. It was so much fun. And another one, I'm really liking these companies that are having like all their stuff already on Roll20. One of the greatest things about Breakfast Cult is it's like a $6 game and you get everything. Right, pre-built in a Roll20. I just sent my players to it, and it has prompts for how to build your characters. It was incredible.
Roll20, by the way, is doing very well with trying to reach out to independent game designers. And I know we've had this discussion before about Roll20 versus Fantasy Grounds versus Forge and all these other ones. But I got to say, if these other people are listening, Fantasy Grounds and the like, if you folks don't want to get left behind, you had better get into doing what Roll20 is doing, because their ability to connect to a bunch of independent. They also their API is much more available. So we have an Esper Genesis specific character sheet that was built in for that. Emberwind has its own character sheet by Nomnivore. So Roll20 has really got it going on when it comes to that. But anyway, so it was awesome. It was as good as you hoped.
It was awesome. So for those of you that don't know, It is a Fate accelerated game, which is kind of like the even squished down version of Fate Core. Okay. It basically takes your skills and breaks it down into 6 versus like, I think the table's like 15 or something like that. Very simple, super easy. It simplifies stunts and a few other things, but it was great. It takes place in the future, 2079. And the basic idea is that the occult has kind of made itself known, but the government is trying to hide it. So they've created this government entity called the Foundation. And the Foundation seeks out, kind of similar like to X-Men or mutants, teens that have shown any kind of interest or taking or a sample of the occult, and they dump them in these schools all over the country where they keep this hush hush and quiet. And so this game takes place at something called Occultar Academy, which is on an island, and you play basically a John Hughes style like Breakfast Club game
Nice.
at this academy, but it's all occult. So you've got a lot of the Lovecraftian lore. There's these horror bits. So I'm using it for Sunday Fun Days now. So you'll have a D&D game in the morning and a Fate Accelerated in the afternoon, but I'm using it like a sandbox. So every time somebody comes in, because they're just one-shot community games, you're just a student at this academy. So we're building this whole student body together as like the dot lot, which has been really cool too. So I had a great time. They had a great time. And I really have to compliment the Roll20 build for Breakfast Cult is killer, spot on.
That's awesome. I definitely will have to check that out more. It sounds like a little bit like what is it? Danganronpa. There's a video game where it feels very much like what you just described. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It's a little bit like Phoenix Wright, like Ace Attorney meets. Yeah, Danganronpa. Yeah. It seems a little bit like that in terms of sort of its kind of like feature set. No, that's cool. That's cool.
It's really cute. It's really, really interesting. Yeah.
That's cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, let us get into the last section, which is to talk a little bit about questions. Only have time for a couple today, Chuck, because we want to, as I say, we're just about at the 2-hour mark. So what questions do you have for Dot or myself or both of us? And it can be, again, what I would ask is if people just do question in all caps, colon, and then the question that you have. It can be about anything we talked about today. It can be about, hey, I'm having this problem with my player because he wants a plus 35 sort of ogre slaying, and we have a low magic system and the highest thing anyone else has is a dagger +1 or whatever. Just let us know. Question, you ever play Geeks and Gamers? Old tabletop from the 80s I played once. You rolled up nerds who used their nerd skills to roll up characters, and you played the nerds playing their characters.
So meta.
I was just going to say, it's very meta. It also
Very
feels like
meta.
Knights of Pen and Paper.
Yeah.
No, I have not played that.
I may have to check that out. That's actually kind of fun. I'm all about metagames. I love metagames. Actually, so Wizards of the Coast, while you guys think up questions, I have to talk about this. Wizards of the Coast announced the Rick and Morty Player's Handbook that's coming out. Now, for those of you that don't know, it is literally a reprint of the Player's Handbook, but Rick Sanchez has gone through and marked out things throughout the book. He's rewritten basically the guide from his perspective.
Okay.
Of how if he was the GM, he would do things. Now, of course, it's Rick, which means he's gone through, he's added science aspects to it. He's marked out stuff that he considers bullshit. It's definitely an R-rated book, I was told. And you're meant to GM it as Rick. You're meant to GM the game as Rick Sanchez. Like, that's the whole idea. It's going to be hysterical, right? I do the worst Rick impression that has ever been ever. But I do a great Morty impression. So I think I'm going to buy it and run it as Morty running Rick's game. So it's Morty's commentary on Rick's commentary on Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is Morty and Rick all the way down, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah,
it's Mortyception.
It's
Mortyception.
Oh my god, I'm sorry.
You are the one. Okay,
that was my tangent. That's my tangent on meta. I had to share that.
Let him have his plus 35 sword of Ogre Slayer, but never have ogres.
Ogres?
You see a large warty figure. Yes, it's a troll. God damn it. No, it's just a large human. God, son of a...
oh, man. I can't wait for it. I'm just so excited about it.
What is up, West River Rat? Okay, last chance, folks. That was a good question. Thank you. Another one or two. Throw another question or two at us, chat. If you have any of them in question, that would be lovely. Yeah, there was a I think there was the Jim Dark Magic, version, like Acquisitions Incorporated version of a couple of things as well, but that was mostly the art, more than actually like altering rules and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's neat. Also, I think I think Wizards, when it got more of a sense of humor, that really helped. Like when Wizards was kind of like they were okay with people poking fun at them. That also helped a little bit because they were like, yeah, we're not threatened by it anymore. And
right. Yeah. Well, they're not actually making. Here's the difference. We used to actually make fun of you. We used to actually make fun of Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Now we're not making fun of you as much as we are making fun with you.
Right.
Which is the difference. And now that we've gotten to that point where it's not people making fun of them, they can make fun of themselves. There's room for that,
Yep. Agree.
Yeah.
I think you're right about that. All right. Last chance, folks. If you want to get a question in for us, now is your last
Now's your chance. I mean, if you don't have any questions, I totally get it. We talked a lot about convention.
We did talk a lot. We got a lot of discussion in. I wish WotC would announce more settings and DM focused books. Yeah, there's been a whole big discussion about the whole thing with splat books and stuff like that. They are going to announce, they've got the new Baldur's Gate Descent thing, which is going down. That's supposed to end in the 9 Hells, which means that suggests that perhaps a setting book might happen.
So it's what the 7th layer is where the Blood Wars are happening. So the module takes place. It starts in Baldur's Gate and ends up in basically Hell, the 7th layer of it, which what they're trying to do is set up for more opportunity. Like you're saying, we're kind of breaking free. But that being said, they did announce something that I was really proud of Wizards for doing, and that has gotten me really, really hyped, which is they have announced, I think I have a sample over there. It's basically like I call it the children's version. Let me grab it. Hang on. I'm going to show it to you. Okay, so I got all kinds of swag from Wizards when I went, which was really, really cool. But they're releasing these things called the Young Adventurer's Guide. Okay, these are really cool. Even though it says Young Adventurer's Guide, don't be turned off by it, because it's also meant to help people that don't do well with lots of numbers and stats, charts, people that have reading and learning disabilities, that find the player's handbook and the GM's guide a struggle. Okay. That just do. So basically what they've done is they've simplified everything. So they are going to be coming out with, I guess, new, I don't know about settings and GM focused books, but new things for ways of viewing and building. So there are no stats. It goes through, the first release that they're going to do is called Warriors and Weapons, and it goes through how to build a character with no stats for kids. So they do really cool things like, look at this. They lay out the races this way. Versus really page by page by page, right? Or they'll do something like this where they talk about this is what the elf page looks like versus all that text. They give you size concepts. They talk about age. They're going to be doing a monster manual as well. Check this out. I love this. They have all these arrows. It's very like visual, where they talk to you about what the different eyes on the beholder do versus like listing it. They've done this really cool thing. They show size so you can see what it is in size of like an average human. But they've also put in a new kind of like Richter scale. So they've put in a new scale, 1 to legendary, which is basically 5, to help kids understand like the danger level. So what I'm in love with this, because it says, do with this creature, do this, don't do this.
Yeah, this is a great idea. This is a great idea.
It's brilliant. It's such an easier way. So I think that it's, if nothing else, my hope is that if these go well, that they'll release more of these for the general DM.
Yep.
They can break things down. They can make it more digestible. I am obsessed with this.
That's a great idea. And again, they don't, and so people are just like, oh, no, but does that mean that they're changing? No, because they're still releasing settings like Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is not, and which, trust me, is an old school module, and it's got an old school feel. Not to mention the third party people like Kobold Press and people like that are producing. Yeah. So like, I mean, yeah, like there's no, I really do think that I really think Wizards made the right call. They spent a lot of time on getting D&D Next, which eventually became 5e Correct. And they hit it out of the park. They did a tremendous job. It's not perfect, but I think they did a very, very good job. Yeah, exactly. Right, Aradinel. I mean, I was hearing that literally when people are just like, I can't believe that they changed it from negative to positive AC. What the hell? Like, like I've been hearing that nonsense about how everything was dumbed down from everything else and how really, like,
And that may have been true, but it makes it more accessible.
well, yeah, and
And
also,
the more, right?
yeah, it 100% makes it more accessible. And there's a certain point where you can't have a game sustained on a group of people that are just, all the equivalent of nuclear engineers. And that's like
Right.
what's required to do. There was a point where 3.5 became unwieldy. It just flat out did. It was just too much going on. And so that went off to Pathfinder. And there are people who like Pathfinder, but there's a reason that Pathfinder is not even a quarter of the level of interest that people have in D&D, which is nothing against Pathfinder. It is to say that it's a much more targeted, specific, and somewhat niche, frankly, group of people that don't mind enormous multi-class this and that, and all sorts of different kinds of armor structures and all this stuff. That's fine, I mean, I have nothing against that, but you've got to be accessible in your stuff, or you're just not going to be able to grow the game.
Yeah.
And get more people sort of making enough money so that we can do all of this stuff.
Plus, think about it. It's really smart. If we get the next generation or the 2 generations down, your kids interested in D&D, they'll be interested in D&D for the next 40 years.
Yeah, 100%. And I was actually... I agree. I was just playing this Little Wizards thing, which I've talked about before. I won't get into it now, but it's sort of like an introductory thing with my daughter. And she's kind of because again, like she's played some regular D&D, but I think this other stuff is a little bit more up her alley. And then she will eventually move into the D&D's not going anywhere, people. It's not going to leave. I promise it'll be there, but it'll be there much better if you can actually get people enjoying the games to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's 100% true as well, Trooper. I have a lot of those first edition books, and yeah, some of the elements do not, some of the...
They don't translate very well, gang. I think actually, do I have my first? What have I got over here? I pulled out so many things from boxes when I moved. There's 3-5. I feel like I have another one. Oh yeah, look. Well, here's a D&D. Here it is.
Yeah, that's second edition right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Womp
good stuff.
womp.
I had that poster. I had it right next to my Nintendo, like Now You're Playing with Power, Nintendo Power poster. It was pretty awesome. So
it's and like they even announced another new starter kit. That was a huge. I say it's not a starter kit. They announced a new Essentials kit, which I'm really excited about the updates. Did you guys hear about the Essentials kit?
I think I did hear about this. Yeah,
I might have whispered that to you too.
Yeah.
Essentials kit's going to be pretty cool.
Yep.
So for those of you that liked the Phandelver, of course, like the entry of all entries into 5th edition, the new Essentials kit will not only include the usual stuff, but it's going to include a new Phandelver module storyline
that's
that
cool.
can be partnered with the Lost Minds to make more of a overall campaign setting. So you don't have to play one and the other. You don't even have to do them in order. There's enough content between the two of them that they say you can run more of like an open sandbox or open campaign on a larger scale. So it's another great like entry point, which I think is really, really cool because people love Lost Minds. It's
a good
brilliant.
adventure. It's good.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree. Cool stuff. And that is, yes, exactly. Crunchy with bad mechanics. Well, that's right. You can have good crunchy games and bad crunchy games, but it's also not the case that a crunchy game is automatically more mature or,
Right.
More complex or more suited for adults than a more narrative focused, less crunchy game. That is not the case, Trooper. In a lot of cases, the narrative based games can actually have deeper emotional complexity than what you can allow for in a bunch of spreadsheets and charts in a couple pages. So
Correct.
you can have good of either way. You can have good
That's a
either way.
good way to look at it. Yeah.
But having said all of that, this has been lovely, but we are now, actually, we just hit the 2-hour mark. So we have got to wrap up here because I've got to get on to the game that I was going to play a little bit later on tonight. And Dot's got to get back to her busy life and stuff like that. So
I'm going to go put my bun on a sofa. That's what he means by busy life.
hey, listen,
that con life.
to rest from your con, to rest from your busy con life.
Yeah.
But always a pleasure, Dot. This was great. Where will the fine folks see you next? Besides on this channel, of course, but where will they see you next for you?
Besides next. So big day tomorrow. I'm back from my 3-week breaks over on Roll For It. I'll tell you, since I have played with Roll For It, it has been almost a year now. That is the most consecutive weeks I have ever missed on Roll For It. I having full on withdrawals. So you best believe that Luvina Sand will be there tomorrow and full ready to go like Game of Thrones shenanigans. So that's tomorrow at 1 over on Roll For It, which obviously if you can't tell, I'm excited about. And then I was trying to think. The next place will actually be, I'm headed to Miami next week, so I'm a week off. But you can always catch me Tuesdays on my own channel running usually indie games. Right now we're playing through Witch Girl Adventures, our little wholesome witchy campaign. Right now they are currently in the cyber realm, if you can believe that, because they're cyber witches.
Sure.
And they are caught in a corrupted save file. They're trying to get out of a corrupted save file.
So in the Witch Girl Adventures, you're caught in a corrupted save file.
Yeah.
I want to be clear.
Yeah. They're trying to get, yes, correct. It's gotten a little crazy, but it's all of it makes sense, I swear. So you can catch me Tuesdays there. Wednesday is always the release of the North by Northwest podcast, which if you would like me, would like to watch me play D&D, that's kind of my usual Dungeons and Dragons place. I will actually be taking over this fall, GMing our last 2 volumes of our podcast. So you should definitely tune in because I'm getting ready to take that sucker right over. And then Thursdays, you can catch me on Unmade Gaming's channel for Cypher System. We play in something called Men of Letters, which is kind of our kind of steamy cyberpunk Cthulhu game that we're playing. Very awesome. And lastly, every other Sunday, The Owl of Lycia is running, which is also an original Cypher System game written by Marcy Vellin over on my channel. So lots of places to catch me rolling dice, telling stories. And if you're new to what I do, I'm a GM and I am a digital storyteller. I just like to tell stories with people. So come hang out, and you can find me online and on Twitter as Little Red Dot.
Always a pleasure, Dot. You'll also, of course, find her here in the our vocalists, where we have finally finished the Banner Saga 2, and we'll be moving on to a new game, which I am debating about the choice of a couple of them, but I'm really possibly leaning towards one of the Phoenix Wright. We've done the first 3, but we'll see. But I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. So. Dot Matrix, the Cyber Witch of Mainframe.
The Cyber Witch of Mainframe, yeah. Actually, I will be at all you reboot fans out there. If anybody's a reboot fan, anybody remembers that animated show, Hexadecimal is on my list of possible cosplays in the long run. I'm just working on that wig situation.
That's awesome.
I love Hexadecimal. She's my jam.
That's awesome. So thank you, Dot. Always a pleasure. This was great fun as usual. And yes, you should absolutely check out Dot at all these things. Good person and a good game master and a good streamer. And I always enjoy hanging out with her and chatting this stuff up. And maybe you'll get to see us do a little bit of For the Queen, maybe on this channel / maybe that will happen. But we will talk about that. But thank you so much, Dot. Always a pleasure. Chat, can we get some love for the amazing co-host, Dot, Little Red Dot? And Dot, thank you so much. And I will catch you soon. And also safe travels to Miami. Bye. Bye for now. Okay. So that is going to do that. That was great. I'm really glad we got a chance to do that. And I want to thank everybody who made this an awesome time today. I am not done. Fear not. But I do want to make sure that I break in between these 2 things that we just did. So just give me 1 second here. Where's my webcam at? Okay. And that transition though. Okay. I love studio mode. Man, so good. All right, so that was fun. I enjoyed that a lot. And thank you to everybody who watched episode 19 of Masters of the Dungeon. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I will restart it, and we will reset for Sorcery, which we're going to be playing in just a little bit. So thank you to everybody. Make sure that you check out my YouTube channel for the previous 18 episodes of this show, and join us next month when Dot and I will return, and this time I will have a guest because I've already got that person sort of squared away. So I am looking forward to that. But thank you to everyone who watched, and I will see all of you lovely people very soon.